Alrighty, it's that time again. Let's look ahead to the first Steam games kicking off in the new year as we dive into January 2025. From JRPG remasters and even more JRPG remasters to some unexpected surprises, we're kicking off the new year with a solid lineup across genres. And with that, let's get started with a remaster of a game that I haven't thought about since I first fired it up years ago on the PlayStation Vita of all consoles, and that would be Freedom Wars Remastered, releasing on January 9th. Freedom Wars is an action role-playing game that's set in the distant future where mankind is imprisoned within city-states known as panopticons, where they're perpetually waging war against each other. Players cooperate to fight various enemies in contribution towards their own panopticon. If you have familiarity with games like Monster Hunter, you'll have a pretty good idea of what to expect here, battling through giant foes, protecting citizens, and shaving time off of your sentence. Sure, the premise is a little bit bleak, but the action looks as thrilling as ever in this faithful remaster that sticks close to its roots. So if you've never experienced this niche title on the Vita, and/or you don't mind at least a little bit of repetition, it's certainly worth a look. But now let's turn our view skyward to the co-op sandbox survival game Aloft, dropping on January 15th. Aloft is set in a world chock full of floating islands, each of which can be built into a giant skyship, allowing you to craft your own personal home in the clouds. Seek out lost knowledge, fight back fungal corruption, and do what you can to make do in this feel-good cozy survival game. Personally, this looks to be right up my alley, provided the survival mechanics are tight and responsive. Survival games can sometimes feel too nuanced or frustrating, but Aloft seems to strike a solid balance between challenge and creativity. Not to mention, the whole thing is set against a vibrant world that's overflowing with intrigue, but if you want to find out for yourself, there is a demo available right now if you'd like to take a first-hand look. But now let's get back down to earth with some grounded but overwhelmingly claustrophobic combat as you take on hundreds of enemies at once in Dynasty Warriors Origins, coming out on January 16th. If you've never played a Dynasty Warrior game before, they offer a big, loud, continual assault on the senses as you traverse shifting battlefields, cutting down enemy troops, and juggling an ever-evolving list of objectives. It's over the top in all of the best ways, and Origin looks to continue that trend with a slick, modern coat of paint. Thankfully, you can adjust the difficulty level and other battle-related settings to ease the challenge if you're not a series veteran, or if you just like your tactical action games to be just a little bit more approachable. And if you're on the fence based on the footage that you've seen so far, or just your prior familiarity with the series, Dynasty Warriors Origins also has a demo available right now if you'd like to go ahead and give it a whirl. Next up, let's jump back into some RPG action with Tales of Grace's F Remaster, also releasing on January 16th. So, full disclosure, I am not a veteran of the Tales series. I've played a handful of them, but there's a lot to it, and this particular title was originally released as Tales of Graces for the Wii back in 2009. But then in 2010, it was ported to the PS3 in Japan as Tales of Graces F, before finally getting released in English under that same name in 2012. So what we're looking at now is a remastered version of that version, coming to pretty much every modern platform, including Steam. Set in a fantasy world, you'll be able to engage in exhilarating, continuous action combat, with your time being divided predominantly between the field map and a battle screen. It features improved graphics and quality of life enhancements, and a huge amount of character customization to better equip yourself as you build up your stats for different combat challenges. And as the cherry on top, there's also an additional scenario you can play after completing the main scenario. So whether you're old hat at the Tales series, or just looking for an entry point to dive in and see what all the fuss was about back in 2009 and then I guess 2012, this will be a great opportunity to do that. But now let's go ahead and check out a PvPvE extraction shooter from Bandai Namco, dropping on the 23rd, Synduality Echo of Ada. Aided by an AI partner known as Menace, players will need to square off against xenomorphic creatures and other players in a hunt for resources. Taking place in 2222, after a poisonous rain called the Tears of the New Moon wiped out most of humanity, humans are forced underground for survival. You'll play as a drifter, tasked with collecting rare resources known as AO crystals, and in so doing must survive the surface, all while squaring off against a range of mutated monsters. Honestly, it looks really fun and refreshingly colorful, which is something you don't often see in post-apocalyptic shooters. And I'm guessing if you're a fan of games like Helldivers 2 or any other large-scale tactical co-op shooter, this is going to hold some appeal, provided you don't mind a large-scale combat grind with a ton of customization for your AI, garage, and mech. Oh, and when it comes to your mech, those are called cradle coffins, which is, well, pretty ominous, but also kinda rad sounding. But I guess we'll know more when it finally drops proper, again on January 23rd. Also releasing on January 23rd, and continuing the remaster trend for this month, we have Star Wars Episode 1 Jedi Power Battles. Originally released on the PlayStation 1 and later on the Dreamcast and Game Boy Advance, this one takes us back to the Phantom Menace era of Star Wars. But now we're getting the remastered version where you can again take back the Theed Royal Palace while engaging in some frenetic lightsaber action. Between the Force and your saber, you'll square off against legions of droids, assassins, and other classic enemies from the Phantom Menace. And you know what? I'm not the biggest Star Wars fan, but this looks pretty fun, mostly because I haven't really thought about a side-scrolling take on Star Wars since probably Super Star Wars Return of the Jedi way back in 1994. And considering it's a fairly bite-sized affair with a 10-level campaign and has couch co-op, this just might be a sleeper for 2025 that brings back some lightweight Arcadey Star Wars fun with some clear retro sensibilities. So if you're like me and totally missed out on this the first time around, and the idea of playing as Mace Windu or Qui-Gon Jinn sounds appealing, I'd say this is one to keep an eye on. Next up, let's get a little old school, like really old school, by taking it back to an 18th century Spanish monastery with Stone of Madness dropping on January 28th. In Stone of Madness, 5 prisoners will pool their skills and resources to face their fears, stave off insanity, and ultimately uncover the mysteries of the monastery to make their escape. And all of this is from the creators of the Blasphemous series, who definitely know their way around creepy periods and rich religious undertones. And I think one of the most intriguing things about how the developers have described this game is that it is possible to make your way through the entire game without killing a single enemy. So it sounds like there's going to be a fair amount of creativity on display here, which is pretty impressive considering this is a narrative-heavy isometric game that will test your stealth and puzzle-solving abilities as much as any combat, I mean, should you opt to lean into that, of course. Plus, its painterly art style, combined with that low frame rate character animation, really does look stunning. So if you're down for a journey into, or well, I guess out of madness, and like a good slow burn thinking man's game, maybe give the demo a look because it's available right now if you want a taste of the gameplay. And next up we have another game for the tactical minded that should be a very exciting release for Advance Wars fans, and that would be Warside. Now personally I never really got into the Advance Wars series, but I always respected it, and I know it's held in a high regard by fans and critics alike. So this is a little bit appealing to me since it feels like maybe a fresh start for me to check out the turn-based tactics action that the series is known for, without feeling like I'm approaching a mountain of established lore or anything. Warside features a single-player story campaign, multiplayer support, and a built-in map editor. Throw in over 25 unit types and 12 playable commanders, and you have a recipe for hundreds of hours of gameplay, I'm sure. But just like so many other entries on this list, there is a demo available for Warside as well, so if you're new to the genre or a returning veteran from the Advance Wars, there's nothing stopping you from charging into the action right now and putting your strategy to the test immediately. And speaking of wars, next up we have a nice little combination of strategic patience and action with Sniper Elite Resistance dropping on January 30th. If you've ever played a Sniper Elite game before, you already know the deal. You'll be skulking around enemy encampments deep in the heart of France, utilizing stealth and finesse to disrupt the Axis powers. You'll have a variety of weapons at your disposal, and naturally be treated to plenty of visceral, slow-motion displays of the absolute mayhem you can dish out with a single shot from 1,000 yards. I've only played a few Sniper Elite games, and most of them were of the zombie army variety, but nonetheless, they've been great fun when I've had occasion to check them out, and I'm sure Resistance is just going to build on the solid foundation of World War II combat that they've been refining since 2005. And finally, rounding out next month's releases with probably the biggest drop of the month, we have Marvel's Spider-Man 2 finally coming to Steam on the same day. And this is probably the entry about which I'm most qualified to speak because I absolutely love this game, just like I love the first Spider-Man and Miles Morales. But putting aside my huge bias for all things Marvel, it's just an excellent game in its own right that builds on everything you've come to love about arguably the best Spider-Man games ever made. It's bigger, louder, and packed with twists, delivering everything from epic set pieces to heartfelt moments between Peter and Miles. It just hits all of the right notes for Spider-Man fans. And everything you loved about the first two games is expanded, from improved traversal to tighter controls, and the biggest draw being able to ping-pong back and forth between Peter and Miles in the open world just to see how their stories weave together. So if you've held out this long to play it, or if you're just so enamored with it that you're willing to grab it a second time just for PC features like ultra-wide support or hopefully to check it out on the Steam Deck, the wait is nearly over. Alrighty, and that's it for this one. As always, this isn't an exhaustive list of every Steam game that's coming down the pike, rather just my personal cherry pick of January's most interesting and notable games that are coming to the platform. Coming up on the channel, we'll be looking at some dock mode optimizations for the Steam Deck, and also look back at some of the games that I completely missed in 2024, which seems completely appropriate given that 2024 is on its way out in about 12 hours. And to that end, please do have a safe and happy new year with those you hold most dear. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with me this year on the channel, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.